So this is part 2 of a talk that I gave last week on the visit to Walla Walla Penitentiary. And this is a facility that has a capacity to hold about 2,200 inmates. It is a place where executions have occurred in the past, and the facility is 132 years old. So we spent some time with 2 different groups. The morning group was very engaged. It was a smaller group. The afternoon group was eventually about 23 people. They were men of color, with the exception of one white fellow who was considerably older than everyone else. So I don't know how he got an invitation to be in the group, except for the fact that he looked like he was the funny guy, and he was always making jokes. So that might have been his ticket in. So they came in with a huge amount of energy. There was a lot of back slapping and hand slapping and handshaking, and they were smiling, and they were very excited to be together, and they were very excited to have this special lunch that was coming up. And I think they were maybe a little bit curious as to what these 2 in robes would have to say about the Dharma. When I saw both of these groups, actually I would be hard-pressed to identify them as inmates if they were wearing different clothes and we were meeting in a Dharma center. They were, all of them, extremely well-groomed. And sure, you know what, they had full-on tattoos. But you know what, big deal. Now in society, full-on tattoos is no indicator of someone being an inmate at all. And when I was growing up, you know, tattoos like that were certainly a sign of you were in a motorcycle gang, you were a former inmate, you might have been a sailor, you know, you were showing your resistance to heterosexual white culture. You were resisting all of that and being different. But that's not the case anymore. And they looked, actually, some of them were quite buff. Well, that's like society for that age group. And they looked quite healthy. And so, you know, what's the indicator here? So in the moments that we weren't saying something, sharing the Dharma, I just sat back and I was looking carefully at each of these people, and it just struck me so deeply that, especially with the second group that was just bubbling nonstop, it was like being in a junior high class, you know, that kind of energy. And I thought, do they really know what's going on for them in here, or have they just settled into prison life? And they're accepting what's going on right now, and they're going to make the best they can of it. You know, how badly do they really want to get out of here? That kept striking me. And you know, what is propelling them to come to this Buddhist group? So those questions never got answered. And then I was thinking about, again, you know, it could just as easily be me in there as them. We've all done stupid things. I'm sure I'm not alone in this group, having done stupid things and not being caught. I mean, I didn't do some really horrific things, but I did stupid things. And how well would I do in that environment? You know, 24/7, being surrounded by people who have made mistakes of different levels. They're all suffering. To be under constant surveillance by guards who treat you in any kind of way they want to, I suppose. And now, if they're not serving a life sentence and they're never getting out, they're branded for life by most of society once they emerge from prison. So I want to use the word brand on purpose. Label is just too flimsy, too soft a word for this. They've been branded. And so, as we know from our experience with cattle and horses, the practice in the past was to get a hot iron, right? Stick it in the coals until it was red hot, and you stick it on the side of a horse or a cow. And you got to get it on there long enough so it sears off the first layer of hairs, but the technique is to get it to the skin so that you don't burn it too badly, but it leaves that permanent mark. Now, what farmer has been trained in burning correctly? I'd be willing to guess that most of the animals are hurt. And this wound is an open wound that goes for weeks. And can you imagine the pain for the animal that is tied to some kind of board so that they don't run away? So that's a permanent kind of mark. So I'll speak for myself, but you can think to yourself too. We've all engaged in branding people. I know I have in the past. So what kind of words have you used to brand people? when your mind's been afflicted. Maybe we've called someone evil, mean. You can call out now. What have you used to brand someone? Stupid, idiots, cruel, irredeemable, obnoxious, odd, miserly. So we've all given someone else a brand in the past. And we've also probably internalized brands from other people. And we all know that when we internalize a brand, we're going to live up to it. So then there's another kind of brand now. We all know about brand name products. But the word brand has taken on a different vibe, and I realized recently I don't really get what this brand means now, so I looked it up. And in the marketing world, brand means, it refers to the perception that people have about your product or your service. So in the case of inmates, even when they're no longer in prison, they will have the brand criminal, felon, corrupt. What else could they have? Sorry? Murderer, bent, dangerous, crooked, shady, villainous, monster. So what kind of prospects do these people have upon release? We know that getting work with a criminal record is almost impossible. We know that finding a place to live is very difficult, if not impossible. Making new good friends, very difficult. And continuing their Dharma practice, if they had one while in prison, we hear is very difficult. The chances of reoffending are very, very high. So I came across some research that was released last year in April of 2017 about the United States, and this has me trembling. The United States has the distinction of incarcerating far more people per capita than any other country in the world. We know that. According to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, more than 2 million people are currently incarcerated in the United States, and over half of those prisoners are in on drug charges, with the majority serving time for non-violent crimes. An additional 10% of the prison population are in prison for immigration violations. That means that over 70% of prisoners in the US are non-violent offenders. And of those incarcerated, more than 6,500,000 prisoners are released every year in the US. Low employment levels for that group cost between $57 billion and $65 billion annually in lost economic activity. Experts say that low reading and technological literacy, as well as reluctance among employers to hire former convicts, means that many drop out of the labor force altogether. So, if these men are not receiving retraining in prison, then in contrast to the monastic rock tumbler that you heard about the other day, these people are acquiring all kinds of points of views from their peers that are fueling their afflictions. The grim and intimidating physical environment of a facility that includes execution for those on death row can't help matters at all. So with the exception of the volunteers who are doing everything possible to connect with these men as people, who reflect back their humanity and who respect them as individuals capable of change and creating good in the world, for the most part, I think these people have internalized the message that they are the unwanted ones in society. So as His Holiness Dalai Lama teaches, prayer is not enough. We must be engaged. So if any of us in the room are realizing that we want to be part of the change in how people who break the law in this country are treated, well, let's first of all turn to the wisdom of Nagarjuna. This is not an advertisement. And in this book, Practical Ethics and Profound Emptiness, a commentary on Nagarjuna's Precious Garland by Khenpo Jampa Tekchog, edited by Venerable Chodron, we hear some fabulous words of wisdom. So, Nagarjuna is talking to the king, and he says, "King, out of compassion, you should always make your mind focused upon benefiting all beings, even those who have committed the most serious misdeeds. Some people do atrocious actions of intolerable evil, such as the 5 heinous crimes, killing their mother, their father, or an arhat, causing schism in the Sangha, wounding a Buddha. Such actions will result in horrific suffering for that person in future lives. Knowing this, have compassion for this person and only wish to benefit him or her, even though he or she must be imprisoned in order to protect your subjects and to prevent him or her from creating more destructive karma. And he goes on to say, free prisoners. Every day or every few days, observe the inmates to see who is physically weak or feeble, and then free them. Though some of the remaining prisoners may be strong and healthy, don't use that as a reason to refuse or ever release them. Never think that you will keep even the worst offenders incarcerated for the rest of their lives with no chance of parole. However long they remain imprisoned, recognize that they can change. And then someone asks, well, isn't prison supposed to make them suffer? What's the sense of keeping them incarcerated if they're comfortable? Nagarjuna responds by explaining that when parents discipline a child with obnoxious behavior, they don't do so for the sake of beating the child. Rather, that objectionable behavior won't serve, but will harm the child in this life. They want to help the child give up the bad behavior and punish him or her for that reason. Similarly, we should not imprison people for the purpose of harming them and making them miserable. Instead, discipline them out of compassion as a means to help them examine their behavior, accept responsibility for their actions, and refrain from destructive deeds in the future. In this, they will change and will have a better life later. Imprisoning them due to anger or with the intention to confiscate their wealth is not correct. So in closing, let's all of us be part of the reform of those who are imprisoned and how they're treated while in prison. You know, remove the mentally ill from prisons, for heaven's sake. Put them in a place, call it the homes for the mentally fragile. Give them peace there. Let's redesign the entire prison system and give the facilities a brand that inspires hope and growth. How about, what? Transforming campuses. We can come up with better names than prison, where these individuals are treated with respect and have daily access to meditation and mind training techniques, where they can learn skills that are needed in the world and are eventually reintegrated into society to contribute in meaningful ways. So obviously our first work as practitioners is we have to train our own mind and transform it. And then if prison work is the place where we want to engage, then train to be a volunteer. Make the gift of Dharma books to the Buddhist group's library in the facility. Join groups that are committed to reforming the prison system. Abolish the death penalty. Make solitary confinement illegal. Make it a crime against humanity. And better yet, become fully awakened so we can be of benefit to all who are deeply suffering.